Hello everyone. There is a buzz in the market that Elon Musk Starlink is a threat to Indian telecommunication player Airtel and Jio. Let's check the ground reality of this. Elon Musk Starlink is entering India with aim of providing internet services to remote regions of the India, where accessing internet is a bit tough and establishing infrastructure is little expensive and cumbersome. How the satellite communication network SATCOM differs from traditional terrestrial communication network. Traditional telecommunication network requires heavy infrastructure like cables, optical fibers, cell towers to provide broadband services. But satellite communication network works with the help of satellites. It provides connectivity with the help of satellites which orbits around the Earth in the lower Earth orbit. So it does not require heavy infrastructure like cell towers, cables and optical fibers. Airtel is having 21% stake in OneWeb. So OneWeb is having almost 650 satellites which are orbiting around there. And Reliance has a partnership with Luxembourg SES, and SES is having 70 satellites which are orbiting around the Earth. And even Amazon Kuiper is planning to launch almost 3000 satellites in lower Earth orbit. Starlink is having an advantage over other SATCOM companies because these satellites are orbiting around the lower Earth orbit, which is nearer to Earth's surface, so that the signal has to travel very less distance, so that the latency time is less and the connectivity is very high. So already Starlink has launched almost 5000 satellites in the lower Earth orbit, and Starlink is planning to launch almost 42,000 satellites in the coming days, and which is the almost 90% capacity of the lower Earth orbit. Lower Earth orbit can accommodate 50,000 satellites. Out of these, 42,000 satellites to be launched by Starlink. As you know, Starlink has backing from SpaceX, which is a satellite launching company. So Starlink is able to launch 42,000 satellites in the lower Earth orbit and can establish monopoly in the space industry. Satellite communication network these are radio waves that should be allocated to private players by government. So generally the spectrum is allocated through bidding process. So the spectrum would be allocated to the player who quote higher amount in the bidding process. But government has decided to allocate SATCOM spectrum administratively, and Indian government has decided to allocate spectrum administratively, which is against the general rule of allocating spectrum through bidding process. In this administrative process, government will allocate the spectrum by collecting small amount of fee which consists of administrative costs. And after that, the Reliance Jio has asked the government to relook into this, because when Starlink start providing network to the urban areas, then they will pose a direct threat and they will be in direct competition with the terrestrial telecommunication network player who got their spectrum through bidding process, and they have paid heavy amount of money in getting the spectrum rights. In this context, we need to recall the 2G scam which happened long back. During 2G spectrum allocation, the spectrum is allocated on first come first serve basis, which results in the loss of almost 1.76 trillion rupees to the Indian government. After that, Supreme Court has mandated to allocate the spectrum through bidding process in 2012. But now, recently, the Telecommunication Act 2023 mandates that the SATCOM spectrum should be allocated administratively. Is Starlink really worth using it? Yes, Starlink is very helpful in calamity hit regions and war-torn regions. When the existing communication network is collapsed, at that time Starlink will be very, very useful. And do you know that Ukraine government has used Starlink services during a combat with Russia in Ukraine and Russia war? Do you know it has happened through just a single tweet from the Ukraine government to the Elon Musk when their communication network is completely collapsed in the Ukraine war? At that time, Ukraine government has requested Elon Musk via Twitter that they need a support from him in the form of Starlink services, and immediately within 2 to 3 hours Elon Musk has responded and provided internet services to the Ukraine, and within 2 to 3 days he has arranged all hardware required to establish the network in the Ukraine, and up to almost 6 months he has provided services at the minimal cost. After that he has approached the US government to fund the project. But what about the cost? You will surprised to see costs of Starlink services abroad, because as of now we do not have any price information what would be the price in India, but in abroad if you see the services, the standard plan which costs around almost $120, if I convert it into rupees it would cost you around 10,000 rupees, and for establishing the initial hardware it almost require $299, which if I convert it into rupees it would be around almost 26,000 rupees. So
pay $5 a GB. In the world average for data is about $3.50 a GB. In India, Jio delivers data at 15 cents a GB.
are we able to afford Starlink services? Because if you compare the prices with existing Airtel and Jio, it costs around 300 to 400 rupees per month for getting broadband connectivity. So are we able to afford the Starlink services? Is Starlink able to provide services to us for the less price? That we have to wait and watch.